Okay, so today we're going to talk about video.
Right.
And you've been one of the most influential people in our industry for decades. So I'm sure you've seen everything, and you've seen video come about. And I just wanted to ask you, why you think that video is one of the biggest opportunities for writers right now.
What happened with the internet is the cost of communicating with either subscribers or prospects went down from 50 cents to less than a penny. And that changed everything. And the biggest thing it changed is the frequency of contact went from an average of 20 times a year for a 12, in other words, if you sold them a monthly subscription, that was 12 plus maybe 8 advertisements is all we could afford to do, to contacting people today on average probably 500 times a year.
Yeah.
So, and that changed the whole relationship. The relationship became much more transparent through the internet. You were talking to them a lot more, but they could also see you. They could research you, and so it changed the whole dynamics of how we communicate, both in terms of the information we provide and how we market to people. I started to encourage copywriters and editorial people to start shift from being from having the promises that they're making and the marketing so jazzy to making their products more unique. Mm-hmm. So that because things are transparent, you have to be authentic. You can't pretend to be something you're not anymore. And this really affected how copy was written. And I think today, for anybody that, for example, sees AWI's copy, I think AWI was always ahead on this. What you see is what you get, and there's a very direct relationship, and I think for the most part, there's a great deal of trust. And so our copy can be less like copy that you'll see on TV, for example, in the old days, like Don't Squeeze the Charm in, and more about our relationship.
I was going to ask, so along the lines of the authenticity point that you're making there, it seems like, back when you were sending out a whole bunch of letters to somebody or a whole bunch of papers in an envelope to somebody, you had to put a whole lot on the page and it was all about the text, right? So now we're coming through into this digital realm where you can actually see somebody and
right.
They look, there's an authenticity element there. But before, it seems like we kind of went into the territory of just having a video where text would play, right? So you would hear reading it. And now we're evolving into something else. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The first video level entry into this game was what we call VSLs, video sales letters. Mm-hmm. And they were sales letters. What they were was a scrolling newsletter, a promotion. Mm-hmm. Written exactly the way you would write it to somebody that was getting it in the mail. There were some real interesting advantages to VSLs. They outperformed mail copy 4-1 in the beginning. The length of a letter is totally determined by the cost of the product, and 90% determined by the cost of the product. Mm-hmm. If you're selling a more expensive product, you need more copy. And that's what happened with VSL letters. So, but then what happened was, and I think this happened maybe towards late 2008, 2009, is people started introducing actual video clips, like video introductions and so on. And what we found was that those things work very well. They managed to do things that were not as easy to do, that only a really good copywriter could do. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, that's what was going on. You were showing video clips that they were well done, that was creating an emotional response in the reader that you could only get otherwise. The other thing that was happening, and I think this is happening more gradually, but it's a very big issue that everybody's aware of, is that as new people were coming into our market that were younger, and people are getting more and more comfortable with getting their information online, is that they were they were getting less and less patient with the standard reading off an entire script.
Yeah.
Now that's not true of people my age and older, because we're just so comfortable reading. But even for people my age and older, I'm quite comfortable getting information through video. I mean, I still read a book a week, but I'm looking at YouTube and for informational topics too. Mm-hmm. So I've been feeling for a long time that there's no question that we're going to move into all video sales letters we're going to move into sales promotions that are exclusively video.
Rather than scrolling text, you mean?
Scrolling text, right. Still, there's this prejudice that has been located in the fact that most of the people in the information industry started where I did, or at the very worst started with VSL. So they still believe that you can write copy the way we used to write copy and present these video formats in this super amateurish way that we began and get away with it. But that's going to become increasingly more difficult. And so I think what's going to happen is in the next 5 years, it's going to happen over, it's not 20, it's over the next 5 years, we're going to go from, it's going to be as big a revolution as I think the original one was. We're going to go from where people are doing what they're doing now, this, we probably need a word for it, this very crude, very obviously artificial form of video and VSL and combination advertising to things that are going to look much more like 60 Minutes.
When you talk about this huge revolution's happening, right? Like all this super high production, beautiful looking video, and how, they're going to catch up to our world, so we need to catch up to that. It sounds super intimidating, right? As a writer, who might not have any experience in video, as a writer, what do you need to consider? How do you actually stay on the edge of that? When you're writing scripts for these things, and
right.
Perhaps giving people some tips on how to produce it, or,
right.
How can we actually get up to that level?
We always said when we were writing for print, write like you speak, right? That was a big rule. And it conveyed something that writers, it was helpful, because writers could understand that the way that when they're writing a sales letter, they're not writing a term paper, they're writing in a way that feels intimate, feels direct, feels honest, and so forth. But the best letters that feel the most conversational are not in the least bit actually like conversation. They're entirely different. So I'll come to the solution in a minute, but they have to understand the problem. All these scripts that still are working, but little less each time, won't be working in a couple of years at all, because the things that you're doing to write those scripts aren't going to work. You need to be able to write a script. And a script writing is different from copywriting. It's different from writing copywriting for print. To write a script for print, copy script, we need a term for it. To write advertising for video copywriting, you need to know what script writers write. And a good script writer, the structure, the language is very, very different from what we're doing. One example, you never stay coherent in your thoughts in scripts. You always jump around. Even this conversation, if you recorded and reread this conversation, even though it may seem like we're staying on the same track, you'll have found that I've changed my direction. I've interrupted myself and moved on 3 or 4 times, jumping. But there's no problem in following it because it's video. We're all used to this. This is how we talk to each other.
Right.
So copywriters need to know how to write. If they're writing for video, they need to know how to write like that. And the good news is the selling components that we learn. 80% of what we teach people at AWI is the structure of how to sell things. That stays exactly the same. The difference is how you actually write the conversation itself. And what you'll discover if you do it is that in many ways it's actually easier. Because one of the things that we do when we're writing for print is we try to create a coherence of thought that keeps people paying attention to us. But video, people pay attention to a video precisely because you don't stay coherent. It's when you flip off a little bit, you move, you shift, it keeps people engaged. And so one secret that I taught the AWI Cubs, because they handed me one of these sales letters that was just emblematic of the problem we're talking about. And I said, listen, I want you to just take this back and I want you to rewrite it. I just want you to do this. Just start to read it in the mirror or tape yourself. And then everything that seems artificial, just change it. And what you'll find out, this is for a lift letter. So it's easier to do on a lift letter. Okay. And what they found out is what happened is they cut the verbiage down by about 60%.
Wow.
And the copy didn't have that coherence. It just hit the high points. And then when we reviewed it, everybody thought it was much stronger. So that gets you half of the way there, which is, so point number one, things are changing dramatically. And you got to get on board if you want to stay ahead, because you're going to be asked to write more video script. Point number two, you already know 80% of what you need to know. Don't worry about it. Point number three, the process of writing for a video will actually be easier and it'll be more fun. But you need to know certain tricks, like speaking into a mirror or recording yourself, so that you can get a real spoken. This will be really like people speak.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark.
Great to see you, Bonnie.
You too, Mark.
Bye.
Bye.